Yep. Give me a nod when you're ready.
Like
Shooter's ready. Stand by.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Gunlock from the 3GIQ podcast. I'm here with my co-host Frank Gow, and we have a special guest. This guy, he is an 0369 infantryman. He joined the Marine Corps shooting team back in 2019, and he set records while he was a summer shooter. Really solid guy, really good friend. His name's Dan Rhodes. When he came to the team, he did a lot of good things with the rifle team, helped try and change vision, went over to the pistol team for a bit, and now he is over at what we call the Advanced Marksmanship Training Package. And they are a really cool unit in itself and what in the direction that they're taking the Marine Corps in terms of marksmanship. So, Dan, before I go any further, can you kind of introduce yourself?
Yep. Everything that he just said. So I work as a instructor for the AMTP. We are subsection of MPMS, which is the Marksmanship Program Management section. That falls under Training Command. Work at Weapons Training Battalion and have been doing so since 2019 and will continue doing it throughout the rest of this year. But yeah, absolutely happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, the creation of AMTP is pretty recent. What was the impetus for its creation? And then where was the demand signal coming from? Was it from the fleet? Was it General Marine Corps wide? Everyone saying like, hey, what we use to assess marksmanship just isn't where it needs to be?
Okay, so back in 2018, we started really pounding away at this. There's a couple different variations of what the program is now. It like most things, starts off as one, doesn't end off as the same. But where we were driving this from was a thing called the CBA, which is just a capabilities-based assessment. It was a test done by many people. It was a several hundred-page document, pretty much just taking what the capabilities are and then discussing on where we fall short. There's a lot of shooting involved, a lot of data collection involved. And at the end of that, the assessment just really broke it down as where the Marines in the Marine Corps struggle when it comes to marksmanship. That thing got sent out to the Marine Corps, and one of the outputs from the Combat Marksmanship Symposium that happens every year was everyone was like, let's fill these gaps right away as soon as we can. So that's when we started looking into AMTP stuff. Really drove the AMTP program from what it was to what it is now. And that gap filling happened as soon as the instructors were formed, if you will, the cadre that fills in the AMTP staff now.
So I gotta ask, I know how it was all formed, but can you describe to the listeners how everything was formed, and what was the desired in strength, and what characteristics do you look for whenever you look for an AMTP instructor?
Sure. So right off the rip, I was actually in Hawaii running a micmac with the shooting teams, and I got a phone call saying, hey, there's this new thing, and that thing being the AMTP, and Weapons Training Battalion was looking at filling it with people from internal, like taken from Hyde to fill those spots. Myself and a couple of other guys on the shooting team, Chris Scott was one of them. We got put into a pile, essentially. Here's our capable guys who can teach, coach, mentor, instruct marksmanship. And out of this crew, all of us went and ran through the initial AMTP with some of the original instructors of the program. Some of those instructors went through the previous versions of AMTP as well. So they're the ones that taught us. Out of that group, I think there was like 14 of us that went through. Out of that came 8. So those 8 were the original AMTP crew for Weapons Training Battalion. They kind of pulled from everywhere. So we have, I think, I'm going to mess up my numbers here. I think we got 6 guys from the shooting team, 2 guys from MTC, and we got a PWS guy. So kind of like pickings from all over the battalion to form that original crew. Some of the desired strengths that they were looking for previously, like I want guys who can already teach marksmanship. We're just going to train them and have them instruct what we want them to instruct, right? I'm just going to say it up front. There wasn't a whole lot of differences from what teams was doing already or how they do things that really differentiated between the two. So the end state or end goal was really met when it was like, hey, let's form this original crew. The only thing we kind of missed out on was like numbers. We really needed like 14 to 15 guys to really feel like we could conquer the world with this thing. But we ended up with 8 and we took it from there.
You know, you bring up some really good points there. But I guess you guys recently ran a tryout of sorts, and it all came from people from within Weapons Training Battalion. And obviously, a lot of people there, like the shooting team is there, so a lot of people take interest in the shooting sports and stuff like that. But what was your format for these tryouts, and how often do you see you guys selves running these tryouts for prospective instructors whenever you do this?
So the tryouts that we just held were done ended early December. It was kind of the same thing again. So we put out essentially like, hey, give us who you feel in your individual sections meet kind of like the description that we're looking for. Again, who's a solid instructor, right? Who understands marksmanship. And then another one of those things we were just kind of looking for is we're looking for like that good dude vibe, right? So like to really mesh with the team. So that's what's great about having a small team. You really get to know everyone and you work well together, right? The bigger that team gets, it can kind of get out of whack. So when we originally had this crew show up, there was 12 of them. And out of those 12, we took 7. Out of those 7, met all the things we were looking for. Got a few more teams guys who are already killing it as far as marksmanship instruction goes. Doing a great job shooting and competing on their own. I got a couple guys from MTC as well, kind of new to the battalion. Didn't really have a foothold in anything yet, so we kind of saw their capability right off the bat. They might not have always been meeting the mark that the teams guys were doing as far as marksmanship performance goes, but man, these guys are into what we are teaching. They think it's awesome. They want to be a part of it, and that kind of fuels them to be part of the team. So it really works out well. So we're up to 14 now. And then looking at growing that in the future, I don't know what that looks like yet. I really don't. But as far as what we have now and pulling from Weapons Training Battalion seems to be working really well for us. And what that looks like in the future, I have no idea.
I have an additional question I want to ask with that. So you have guys that may not come in with the same skill level as the team guys. What do you guys do? What's the process of getting them up to speed, and how long does it take to get them up to speed, even if they're not maybe as fast as teams guys? Like how long does it take to get them to an acceptable level?
Sure. So I could have answered this in the original one too, I guess. So I'll say it this way. The format that we kind of followed for this tryout was an AMTP. So we wanted twofold, right? If we're not taking everybody to be a part of AMTP, then at least we're returning these guys with having attended a course, right? Because we're trying to validate ourselves as an actual POI within the Marine Corps. So we got to send everyone away who didn't stick around with a AMTP cert, right? But the format being AMTP in and of itself, like there is a significant level of marksmanship improvement that you're going to see in those 2 weeks. So as all of the Marines that we took from Weapons Training Battalion, every single one of them, we saw improvement, right? And so very much like teams has done in the past, where we're looking to see what kind of guys we pick up for the summer, we're looking for like guys who are coachable, right? So like I tell you something to fix, and then I'm watching you currently try to fix it on the spot. I'm not getting a lot of like, oh, I did do that, or I'm not actually doing that, or that doesn't work for me, or whatever, right? These guys were willing to work with us and accept the criticism that they were getting and turn it around for good. So we were seeing a lot of beneficial feedback from them as far as their marksmanship goes. So that was one of the big contributors to who we ended up picking to come over here.
Nice.
Nice. And I've shot a match with a lot of the instructors, and it's a good group of guys. They legitimately seem to enjoy each other's company, and the fact they're going out and competing is awesome. You touched on it briefly that the POI kind of drew from the MICMIC POI, and as we all know, the way the MICMICs were taught was derived a little bit from competitions, a little bit from the way 6 Hour Academy approaches its instruction, but in its current form right now. I have to imagine that you guys have incorporated some other influences. So did you take influences from elsewhere in the military, in the civilian world, or from the competitive world?
Yep, absolutely. So the that birthplace of where the AMTP came from was done by an Air Force guy, actually, is where we found a lot of this information. That guy's a ghost to me. He's kind of one of those like autonomous guys that kind of do things on his own. Came up with the original program from the beginning, and where he drew his inspiration from, I don't know that answer. But I can tell you that what he groundwork laid out was working, right? A few iterations of the AMTP going forward, you start to see a lot of like the competition world kind of show itself in there as well. So the way we collect our data is using a system called JMAP. It's essentially a sister version of Practice Score. So we use a lot of timers and tablets to calculate the data that we pull through so that everything we're doing is kind of driven by data. So we're making data driven decisions. That really helps us out. So as far as like where these all came from, I couldn't tell you where it all came from. I like to think it's kind of like a hodgepodge of a little bit of everything. There's probably some law enforcement mixed in there, different versions of military training mixed in there. You can absolutely see the competition world shining through there as well. And it is very much strictly a marksmanship course, right? We're not out there teaching tactics. We're not teaching this is the best way to do business. This is the how to shoot your weapon system better.
Okay. So would you say that if it was a deficiency identified by that CBA that you referenced, and it's something that you can quantify, and it's also something that's pretty challenging, then that's something you guys would consider adding to the POI?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're trying to do as well is because we have such a healthy staff of competitive shooters, we're constantly going out there and trying our hands at local matches, right? We're not out there trying to compete at majors. We're not trying to win nationals. There's a couple night shoots that we've taken a part of that we've competed against. And really what that did for us is kind of prove that what we teach works, right? So we do a lot of day shooting, but we do just as much night shooting as well. So being able to take what we have taught and learned from this course and go and apply it, right? And the outcome of that was I had a lot of guys sitting in the medal bracket at the end of it, right? Which was the goal. Maybe not the goal, but that's what we were hoping for. But at the same time, it was nice to see it shake out that way because it kind of validates your program a little bit, right? And again, we're not the group of guys who are going to go clear a house and then judge ourselves based off of that, right? I'm going to base everything off of the marksmanship side of that evaluation, not how I cleared a house, right? I'll leave tactics up to people who that's their job. I'm going to stick with the marksmanship part because that's what we know best.
Yeah, that's great. But I guess my next question is, out of everything that you assess in your POI, you mentioned that some of the shooters that you bring in, either as instructors or that you're trying to teach through the program, they don't really have a competitive background. Are there certain parts of the POI that you assess are more challenging and that those kinds of shooters might have more issues with?
Yep. For those people who competitively shoot, if you didn't grow up with a pistol in your hand and you started learning pistol later on in life, you're going to realize that's probably the hardest thing you've ever tried to achieve in your life. And we see that right up front every time, right? So guys get a pistol put in their hands, and the first thing we do with them is we run them through the evaluation, run them through a test. And most people fall apart with the pistol right away. That seems to be the most challenging aspect. It's in our POI for a couple of reasons. One, because we firmly believe you will be a better shooter if you understand how to shoot a pistol. So we rely heavily on that aspect, and that generally seems to flow well into everything else we further on train when it comes to rifle. Right off the bat, though, hands down, pistol is a thing that the Marine Corps struggles with, mostly because there's not a call for it either, right? We're not asking people to be dual armed, but it is a great training technique to improve your rifle.
Oh, I'd completely agree. And I think, Dan, you and I have had this conversation before. And I know I've had this conversation with teams guys in the past, like in 2019. Like you would see guys who were significantly better with pistol just destroy people with the
Yep.
rifle, just because you're dealing with something that has that long of a sight radius compared to something like this. So the margin for error is a lot larger when shooting a pistol. So if you could hone in your pistol skills, your rifle skills are just going to follow suit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I have a quick impromptu question I just thought of. And a lot of it comes down to is, we have this program now called the AMTP. But who is your client? Who are you going out and teaching? And then who do you, as this gets bigger, who do you plan on teaching?
Okay. So originally we were formed for one purpose. The cadre was formed for one purpose, and that was for the SOI instructors, right? SY East, SY West. This was created for them because it directly correlates with the IMC that is being ran at SOI ITB right now. When the IMC got revamped a few years ago, they were looking for a program that would enhance their marksmanship capabilities, right along with the CBA. They want to start them young at this point, right? So there were two programs put up, and the AMTP was the one that was selected. So we were formed to essentially go travel to those locations so that we could hit them at home. What that's generally turned into is we're going to host it here in Quantico, right? So we're going to run that schoolhouse very much like a CMC CMT, right? We've got an initial course and an instructor course. Our initial clients, though, are SY instructors. We're trying to stack these classes with as many SY combat instructors as possible. In the future, this is for the infantry, right? This is specifically for them, by them, for them, if you will. And we're trying to get it out to them as much as we can. We're generally getting onesies or twosies from different infantry battalions from across the FMF. So that's been great. And generally we've been met with a lot of like, guys, this is awesome, right? So they're eating it up as well. I don't think that we're big enough to get it out as fast as everyone would like it to, right? So I've got tons of people hitting up MPMS trying to get guys in there. And at the end of the day, filling seats is kind of what we're at right now and what we're doing. So we'll get it out as soon and fast as we can. I don't know what the projection looks like though, right? So if all these guys are getting it at SOI, right, 3 years maybe, they start turning into sergeants. 4 years they start turning into sergeants, we'll have them back, right? And we'll run them through the instructor course so they can start running training for their Marines. And at that point, that's where it really starts to gain some traction. When you got sergeants reteaching, if you will, or furthering, sustaining that training that they were taught at SOI, and then it just takes off from there, in my opinion.
I have kind of two follow-up questions for that. First, you said IMC. So, whenever you and I grew up in the Marine Corps, and we went to the School of Infantry, and this is just broad-based knowledge for people who aren't in the Marine Corps, or aren't in the military. The IMC, is that Infantry Marines course?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And then you said a statement, for the infantry, by the infantry. And this, yes, I guess this program was designed by infantry Marines in particular. But you guys have instructors that aren't infantry men, right?
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
and that's not taking anything away from them, because they're very good at what their primary MOS is, but then they're also very good marksmanship instructors. So I guess my follow-up is, whenever they go out there and talk to these combat instructors that are infantry Marines, your non-infantry guys that are instructors, do they ever get any kind of pushback, or are the combat instructors like really professional in how they handle themselves? And like, everybody has egos, especially in the military, and everybody thinks they're the next Billy Badass. So what's the environment like whenever you have that? And do you ever have guys that have to like kind of prove themselves like, yes, I know what I'm talking about?
Yep. So a lot of our program relies on performance on demand. Okay. So we run our standards, right? And every time we tell them what's coming up next, we demo it for them. They don't ever see anything for the first time off the sights of their own gun, right? So they're watching every single one of my guys run the same drill that we're asking them to, and meeting the standard that we're asking them to meet it in. And I love absolutely love putting a motor T guy up there to run some of these drills, right? And watch the O3 community to my left, jaws kind of hit the floor, right? They're like, wait, this guy does what? Right? It's like he teaches marksmanship. Okay, that's what he does. He just happens to have a day job as well, where it's motor T or whatever the case might be. I got a dad Marine, like I said, PWS guy, right? This guy builds guns, but he can also shoot them as well. So it has not been a hostile environment, right? A lot of these guys, I think we all know, right? And even when we were young Marines kicking it in the trenches, it was like, yeah, I'm Billy the badass shooter, right? You think that to yourself, but then there's always someone else that you meet right on the rifle range or whatever that generally tunes you up a little bit. So there's that inner competition that you never really get to breed right off the rip. But when they come here, again, we make it very clear this is marksmanship only. So you can check your how much weight you carry in your pack at the door, right? This is all about shooting. So we absolutely do a lot of performance on demand that really kind of right off the bat too. Our initial evaluation is hard, right? So we tell you right on the spot, pass or fail. Very few times do we say pass on our first time, right? So it's met right out the door, right off the rip with a lot of failure. And so most of the time when most people, not just Marines, but most human beings get met with failure, you either shy away from it and you just struggle the next 2 weeks, or you just kind of eat it up and it really improves your performance.
No, I appreciate that. That I think that really clarifies a lot of stuff right there. And seeing that AMTP falls under Weapons Training Battalion, just like the Marine Corps shooting team, a lot of your, instructors came from the Marine Corps shooting team. How do you see the relationship between AMTP and teams working out for the foreseeable future?
Well, Matt, you might remember you were in Weapons Training time before I was. Was there ever a strong relationship between MPMS and teams?
No.
Okay. I've heard there's been rumors that it used to be hand in hand, right? It used to be teams used to be out there learning the newest and best ways to do it, right? And then that would get translated over to MPMS, who again is in charge of like doctrine, right? We're the ones pushing out ARQ doctrine, CPP doctrine, tables 3 through 6.
Well, it used to be plug and play, especially with like the warrant officers, because whenever they had the range officers there, there's only a few places that rangers officers used to go to. The shooting team had like 3 ranger officers on it, 2 or 3. Then there's MPMS, and then there were the different range complexes around the Marine Corps. And so, and then I guess some of the warrant officers, when they would go over to MPMS, they would take guys from the team with them, guys that they trusted. But that hasn't happened, obviously, in a long time because we don't have range officers anymore.
Sure. I guess, yeah. I mean, and then we can all sit around and talk about how much or how little marksmanship has changed in the Marine Corps in the last decade or two, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're asking like my opinion personally, like I'm hoping that we can kind of bridge that gap between both organizations. What that turned it into, I don't know. What I'd love to see it turn into would be some sort of like mashup, right? So 2 years on teams, last year MPMS, whatever that looks like, I don't know. But I think it benefits both organizations, right? So teams maintains their mission, which I think is important, right? And so they're out there running their mix, running their summer seasons, competing at a national level, as they should, because that's how you get the quality of Marine instructor that we're getting pulled over to MPMS later, right? And then you might spend your last year at MPMS rewriting doctrine, right? Making it better, constantly changing it, because staying stagnant doesn't do anyone any better, right? And so I think that could be a way forward. Whether that's the appetite or not, I couldn't tell you. But as long as I'm here, I'm going to keep trying to pull onesie twosies from teams, because that is super beneficial to have that kind of background to fall back on. The marksmanship level's already there, and these guys are phenomenal instructors up front as well. So it kind of fits the bill.
Well, what would be absolutely beautiful, and I know it's never going to happen, is instead of like coming over to Weapons Training Battalion on a 3-year contract, if they made it like a 4-year contract, because, especially for teams guys, because let's be real, by year 3, that's when you finally came into your own and you really started, like, that's when you become that heavy hitter. And traditionally that's how it's always been, especially if you're a guy that came from a non-competitive background and you got there through the summer season. By year 3 you're shit hot. it'd be cool if you spent like 3 years on teams and then 1 year at AMTP, something like that. That way, now whenever you go to AMTP, you're really giving back and you're getting the best version of that person and their abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I got an assortment of questions in no particular order. Dan, you
Same.
mentioned that like the POI is pretty grueling and you expose people to failure right away. One of the things I've heard, I guess, what is do you have a favorite part of it, and why is it the 8-hour dry fire sleigh fest?
So that is one of my favorite parts. And I'll say it right up front. It was miserable and grueling for different reasons for different people. I got to sit across the room from Chris Scott, right? And we're both dry firing pistols coming essentially from the pistol team. And you're having me dry fire for 8 hours. And it's just like, dude, I get it, right? What I had to then come to terms with was like, there's a guy right next to me. This is his first time dry firing, right? Like, if you don't know what dry firing is, if you are not inside the shooting competition world, it's going to be hard to define what a dry fire session looks like to somebody. So for us, that is key and constant throughout the entire course. We really reinforce perfect practice, right? So kind of the premise of our 8-hour dry fire session, regardless of how many Marines we have in the course, it's 10 perfect reps, and then we'll move on to the next thing, right? So we break down the draw process, the way we teach it, and it's like when we all move to grip the pistol right off the bat, we all do that 10 times clean, we'll move on to the next thing, right? And there's times associated with each one of them. We work it down. We go from really slow, chop that in half, maybe by a third, right? And we just keep bringing it down till it's right in the zone that we're looking for. And then from that, we progress. If we don't make it through 10 and we get to 9 and old boy at the end misses one, we go right back down to 1 again, right? So everyone who's good, who did 9 good ones, is going to get 10 more good ones, right? And then the whole point of that, and one of the major things that we really rely on when it comes to AMTP, is incorruptible gun handling skills. I'm going to burn this into your brain, and we generally get done at about 1, 2 in the morning. But what's really cool is when we show back up to the range, 07, 08 the next day, and the first thing we're teaching is pistol. It's really cool to see what 8 hours dry fire does to a guy who has never done it before, right? And then all of a sudden, this guy's coming out of the holster looking like he knows what he's doing. And it's like, dude, this is so cool for me. That's why it's my favorite part. It's grueling. It is painful. Guys generally wear Band-Aids or athletic tape on their knuckles for the last 2 weeks, but it definitely gets them into a point where they're in receive mode instead of maybe this isn't for me mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're definitely setting the tone by starting off like that. So it's awesome to hear. I've never dry fired 8 hours in a row. I don't think I ever will, unless the Marine Corps forces me to.
Sure.
You mentioned AMTP Marines like going out and competing. Is that a common occurrence? And then does Weapons Training Battalion AMTP have a support system to like encourage Marines to go out and do that on their own dime?
Yeah, so I'll answer that a couple different ways. So those of us who came from teams, we absolutely believe in the mantra, right? Like, competition breeds excellence. We believe that from the day we set foot into the downrange club, and that doesn't leave us, right? That's kind of ingrained in us. And I didn't really know that until I left my time on teams in the first place. I left and I was like, man, I'm really hurting for that next match. I need to go to the next match, right? And yeah, a lot of those come out of my pocket, right? But what we found out was we got a new colonel, and he was all about it. He was like, yeah, you guys should be doing competitions to prove that what you guys are teaching, coaching, that it works, right? And he was right up front, and he was very supportive and sending us out there. That's why we did our night match, and we'll continue doing our night matches because it's important to him. It's important to all of us. And it really it's the way to go, right? If you're not competing against your peers, don't expect to get better, right? On the other hand, we host, because we have such a large group of teams guys, and teams is also right down the road. It is not uncommon for teams and NPMS to get together on a Thursday, set up our own match, shoot it, and then do it again at night, right? Just to make sure that it goes both ways. And what's really interesting is watching teams guys shoot at night. Not something that they normally do. They're starting to get into it now, which we're really fond of. But it's really cool to see guys like Joshua Cardenas will walk out there during the day and smoke everybody. And then you turn the lights off and he'll smoke everyone again. So it's like, okay, so what he does during the day is just as important as doing it at night. The only difference is I'm just turning the lights off, right? So his gun skills are perfect. They're on par, right? So he's able to just run that over and over again. And the time difference, guys, let me tell you, the time difference between daytime and nighttime is not that different. This guy is doing the exact same thing twice, right? So it's super cool. And we really glean a lot from that, right? We go back into what we teach and how we teach it. And we're like, okay, so what we teach during the day is doing the same thing at night. And we really bounce that off each other all the time.
Yeah, it's a good point about the difference between day and night shooting. Those first iterations where you basically left like the stages from QSC, USPSA up, and then you ran them at night. At first, I was a little tentative, but then after a while, you're just like, yeah, I know where my gun is. I know what angle my mag well's at. Like I could slam these reloads. And then once you get the confidence, yes, I beat one of my daytime runs at night. Cool. Like I was just like, what the hell? Yep. Why can't I do that when the sun's out? That's stupid. Yep. So Dan, I appreciate you coming on and talking about AMTP. Just wrapping it up, one last question for you. So I know that you are due for order soon. What is something you hope to see happen by the time that you are out of the seat? What is something that you hope AMTP is able to accomplish within the next year? And then like long-term Marine Corps wide, where do you want to see this program go?
So up close, my first major goals, really working with Weapons Training Battalion academic section to really get this thing put on a paper. So like in the traditional Marine Corps POI and what that looks like, you're coming with a PowerPoint, a lesson plan, maybe a student handout. That's generally what it looks like when you say POI. We're doing 21st century learning now in the Marine Corps. It's not looking just the same. What that looks like for a marksmanship program gets a little difficult, right? When you tell someone that you could be dry firing for 8 hours, that really looks weird when you put it in POI format, right? So I don't know what that's supposed to look like. We've got a lot of people and a lot of support helping us, making sure that that gets off on the right foot. But before I leave NPMS, I'd love to make that official. The faster that gets done, the more it opens up doors for us. We can get more people here. Maybe we get some more BICs to fill, right? So now monitors can actually send Marines to us, whatever that selection process looks like. But that would be my upfront goal. A little farther down the road, I'm hoping that this goes to not just Quantico, but it is like a maybe biannual thing where we go down to both SOIs and we run larger size courses down there while also running courses here in Quantico. So just kind of expanding the footprint, not just keeping it here at Weapons Training Battalion. It's like we all know, it's super nice to train at home when you have all your resources available to you. And it gets a little weird when you go somewhere else to plan that. But I'm hoping that a little bit, not too far away, it starts to look a little normal. And when people say things like, hey, the AMTP crew is coming down here to run a 2-week range, that now becomes like more of a household name, right? Farther down the road we're looking, man, I can't wait to get out of the Marine Corps just so I can read some article about AMTP later on in my life where it's like, hey, the Marine Corps has increased proficiency in marksmanship by 400% or whatever that looks like. That would mean a lot to me. I think as an enlisted Marine, I think we all at one point in our careers strive to make change. And it's super hard as an enlisted Marine, right? And a lot of times you might feel like your comments, thoughts, actions kind of fall on deaf ears. And you might believe that you're trying to change the world, but it just doesn't always happen for everybody. I have been blessed to be put in the position I am to affect the amount of change that I'm able to affect. And I believe in what I'm doing. I'm super excited that I got to sit here and talk to you guys about it. Yeah, so I think in the future, hopefully, I don't know, maybe a Marine Corps Times article about AMTP, and that would be the coolest thing for me to see.
You know, you said something that I just thought of it. This would be cool as a long-term goal. Kind of like, you know, you have the big Marine Corps shooting team, and then you have these post and station teams. It'd be really cool to see like AMTP, like you have the big team up at Quantico, but then you have no shit dedicated AMTP sections at
Yep.
the SOIs.
Yep.
You know, that is their sole focus. That'd be really cool to see.
Yeah. So let me expound upon that a little bit as well. So us teaching combat instructors is to create extra AMTP instructors, right? So the 2 courses, they go through the first one, they come through the second one. That's our like T3, right? That's us teaching them how to teach the material. From there, they are free to run AMTPs, right? So if it's a combat instructor in a single company in ITB and he wants to run some of his students, some of his fellow combat instructors, he has the license to do that, if you will. But yeah, absolutely. And the SOIs are doing that. They're starting those. Absolutely. The goal of what we're trying to achieve right now is to get SOI up to being able to sustain themselves, right? And I'd like to jump out and like, hey, First Marines wants whatever battalion wants an AMTP crew to come down. That's kind of what I was hoping for, I think. But yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. Well, hey, thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate this. This is good information. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm super happy that you guys asked me to be on here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this. Please take the time, go on Spotify, Apple, whichever app you use to listen to our podcast, and give us a rating, leave a comment. If there's anything you guys want us to talk about, hit us up and we'll try and get it out there. Thank you.